Hello everyone. Yeah, in this video I'm going to explain how to set up two-factor authentication in your Node.js /Express API. And this is very important. This is something you would want to set up for extra security for your users, right? And it's quite easy to set up, right, due to the fact that there are already existing libraries that make all of this easy. And yeah, so the entire process around implementing two-factor authentication. But before that, I'll be building on a code I developed in a previous video where I vibe coded and I was like setting up authentication with PostgreSQL, Prisma, yeah, and then I'm creating JWT tokens. And yeah, I pushed my code to GitHub, and yeah, you can just open this GitHub repository and pull this code where we worked on some API endpoint. We created routes for sign up, for login, for logout, to refresh your access token, for forgot password, reset password, and we just saw how what a protected route will look like, right? And here we spinned up a PostgreSQL database using Savala, a product by Kinstar. And in another video I also explained how to set up a PostgreSQL database using Docker. And yeah, so if you'd also want to create this locally, you can create this locally, and I also explained how you could add it to your project, right? And yeah, so you could create, so when you pull this code to your system, you install the packages and like add the environment variables, and you'll be good to go, right? And that's what I have here. I would quickly go through the code softly, but I was going to explain the entire process around two-factor authentication, right? And it's in two folds. If you understand how two-factor authentication works. So first of all, the way it works is in the sense that as a user, when you sign up, your two-factor authentication is never enabled by default for you. You have to be the one to enable this feature, right? And so this means an authenticated user is logged into their dashboard, and then they can go to maybe the security settings page. I'm trying to bring up a familiar dashboard I'm used to. I think one dashboard I can bring up is the Kinstar dashboard. At least I'm familiar with it. Now when I go to the user settings and I scroll down, yeah, I see this enable two-factor authentication. Now I am only able to see this because I am already logged in, I'm signed in and all. Yeah, so now what happens is, when I toggle this enable two-factor authentication, now the backend generates a unique secret, and from that secret it's able to build a QR code that embeds that secret, right? Now what happens is, you as the user, you scan this QR code using an authenticator application like Google Authenticator, and then from there you start generating 6-digit codes based on the secret, right? And the user is prompted to enter one of those codes. Now when so with this QR code generated, once you scan it, you'd have like 6-digit code. When you enter it here and you click the verify button, backend, so basically on your database, you would have like a field that helps you know whether a particular user has 2FA enabled or not, right? So by default it's going to be false, but the moment the person clicks the verify button, they're going to change the false to true. And once this is done, it alters the way the person logs in, right? So once this is enabled, the way the person logs in becomes different. Now why I say it becomes different is in the sense that now when the person logs in, this is the whole idea behind the two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, right? Now, when the person enters this, let's say, email and password, we verify that against the database, right? And now if we notice that the particular field that signifies that two-factor is enabled is true, then we don't generate the access and refresh token for that particular user, right? Now what happens is the user needs to go to the, let's say, 2FA/login route for them to enter the token from the Authenticator app. Now the moment they enter the token, it compares it against the secret. So we're also going to store like the secret that is being generated. It's going to compare it against the secret, and if it is valid, that is when we are now going to generate the refresh token, which is going to be stored in the cookie, and then the access token, which the user can now be able to use for other requests. But one thing that is also going to happen under the hood is for you to know that all these routes are protected, right? Especially all the routes around the two-factor authentication are protected. The only one that has a little bit of different sort of protection is the one where after you log in, you know, when a user has logged in and has two-factor authentication enabled, the user is not yet fully logged in, so we really cannot like apply the full sort of protection to that route. So we're going to create like a temporary protection, and then like that's, but we're going to get to all of that soon. Now you may be asking, how are we going to be able to implement this two-factor authentication? Now popularly people use the Speakeasy library, but this library was last published 9 years ago, and funny enough, it still has like a lot of like weekly downloads, right? Keeps increasing. I tried to like search for another like standard library. I saw the OTP library, which also has not really been maintained for 5 years, but it has more weekly downloads, and I thought to use this one instead. So the approach is similar, and in case you see a modern library, the approach to all of them is always similar. And alongside, we're also going to make use of the QR code library to be able to like put out like a QR code using the base 32 string that we're going to get, right? Now, yeah, we're going to do all of this in our Node.js project. So back to our Node.js project, quickly, we have the route. Now in the route, we have route for sign up and all of those things like I mentioned the other time. And yeah, we're handling most of the logic in the service folder, where we are getting data from the controller. When we get like the field, the data, then it is passed to the service, and then in the service the core logic is happening. For example, for sign up, when we get the email and the password, we're going to check it in the database if it exists. Now if it exists, then we're going to hash the password, and then we're going to create a user in our database, and then we're going to generate the access and refresh token. And this is like the whole logic for this one. And then it's going to come back to the controller, and then we're going to store the refresh token in the cookie, and then we're going to return the access token so that the user can now add it for protected requests, right? Yeah, and same applies for login, log out, and other API endpoints in which we worked on in the last project. We also created a utils folder for token here, which helps us to generate access token, generate refresh token, verify the refresh token, and verify the access token. Now this is for when we are handling forgotten password. So you know, we need to generate a token, and yeah, for us to like reset password. Yeah, so that's why we have this here. So just so we can put everything around tokenization in one file, that's why we did all of that here. And you'll notice we're using different secrets for the access token, for the refresh token, and yeah, we're also still going to create one for the temporary 2FA token, and we're going to get to that shortly. But before we move on, I would like to install the libraries we're going to be making use of. So we're going to be making use of the QR code library. So I'm going to install that, and we are also going to make use of the OTP library. We're also going to install that. Now this is a TypeScript project, so we need to install types for the OTP library. But yeah, we're going to get to that later, but I can just like leave things as it is now. So now that we have the libraries installed, we can now start getting into the core logic. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the Prisma schema, and we're going to update the database field. So currently we have the email, the password, and other information. I'm going to add in 3 fields. So the first one is like a boolean, so it's going to check if 2FA is enabled or not. So it's to store like a true or false value if 2FA is enabled or not. Then yeah, we have to store the secret that is being generated by the library, right? That which is very important for validating the 6-digit code that is being entered from maybe the authenticator app to ensure that it actually aligns. Right now, I'm also creating a field to store temporary secret. Now this is not the best approach, right? You could pass the secret as your return response and then maybe store in local storage or something, right? But what I'm trying to do is I don't want to enable two-factor authentication just when the user starts the setup process, just when they toggle the setup process. I don't want to change the value to true until when the user has entered a token and it's already validated. That's when we're now going to set this to true and then store the secret and then delete this one. Yeah, so we're going to get into the real code now. So with this table adjusted, we need to migrate the database so that it has like the new fields. And once this is done, yeah, I really don't know how long this is going to take. But now coming to the src folder, now in the controllers we have the auth controller.ts file. I'm going to create another file to handle all our two-factor authentication controllers, because we're going to be creating different routes. We're going to be creating a route to set up two-factor authentication. We're going to be creating a route to verify the whole setup, that's by passing in a token. So the verifier route is going to generate the QR code. Now when the user scans the QR code, so the verify setup route is to take the token that the user gets and then verify it against the secret, right? So that's the verify setup. And then we're also going to have another route we're going to have other routes, right? So I'm going to create a file called 2fa.controller.ts. And similarly, in the service folder, I'm also going to create 2fa.service.ts file. Yeah, these are the basic files we're going to need, right? For us to do this, first we're going to import Authenticator from otplib. That's the library. That's the library we installed. We're also going to import QR code from the QR code library. And now, since we're going to be interacting with Prisma, we're also going to import the Prisma client. So in the file here, we did all the old importation, so we don't have to be importing this in several files, right? So we're going to import Prisma from the client. Yeah, so the first service we're going to create is going to be targeted towards the generate two-factor setup. So I'm just going to copy code and paste it here, and I'm going to explain the code right now. This is flagging an error because this is a TypeScript project, so we need to install types for this. So I'm going to install that now. This ID is going to be getting it from the controller. So let's go back to the controller. Now in the controller file, in the controller, basically we're going to be importing response and request from Express for type safety, right? And then yeah, we're going to be importing asterisk, let's call it two-factor service, right? From not auth, but from 2FA.service, right? Now for the setup 2FA route, so we're just going to create a function. Now this function, it takes a request and response in which we're adding their types, right? Now remember, like, now I said this is going to be a protected route. So if you come to your route file here, we're meant to have routes. I add the routes now. We're meant to have 4 routes. So I'm going to comment all of this now. So we're meant to have 4 routes. So this route is for the setup, and it is always going to be a protected route. So we're protecting it using the middleware we created earlier. So it's only going to run if we have an access token, passed alongside the request. So it's a protected route, and then like this is the function setup 2FA. Now we're not seeing it because we've not yet imported. So we're going to import 2FA, right? And then yeah, so this is a route setup. Now because this is this is a protected route, and you know the access token is signed by JWT. So if you come to the utils, the tokens, now generate access token, so it is signed. So we have our user ID, which is like stored in like within the 2FA token, right? So now coming to the controller, so that is why we have access to the user ID. And since we have access to the user ID, so now we can for us to generate the QR token, so we're using this generate 2FA setup function that we created in the service file. So just from this service, and we're passing the user ID. So in the service, we're getting the user ID, which is going to be a string, right? And then we are getting that particular user from Prisma using the user ID. Now when we get the particular user, now the next thing that we're doing is using the OTP library which we imported earlier. We are generating a secret. So using the generate secret method, we're able to generate a secret, and we're storing it to a secret variable. And also we're able to generate a URL. Now what this does is it takes 3 parameters. So it takes the user email. So when you check your authentication, I'm going to show you, it takes the user email, so the name of your application. So I'm just using code withdraw, you can use any other thing. And then it takes the secret. So it takes the secret, the email, and the name of the application. And then using this value, using this URL, we can now be able to generate a QR code. So we're going to generate a QR code which the user can then now scan. So the next thing we're doing is we're updating the Prisma database. Now an error is being thrown here because in Prisma we have 2FA enabled, which I think is different from what we have here. Here we have 2-factor enabled, so it's different, right? So I'm just going to adjust that. So we have 2FA enabled, and we have we are updating the database with 2 values, right? So we are keeping this value as false because the user is not yet authenticated. Like the 2FA is not yet set up. We're just in the process of setting it up. So now we have just been able to generate the QR code, and we expect the user to scan the QR code and then the token. So at the moment when the user enters the token and we verify the token, that is when we are going to set this to true, and then we're now going to store the secret permanently, right? But for now we're just storing it temporarily. And then we are still ensuring that this is false, and then we are returning the QR code. So this QR code is going to be gotten in the controller. So we're going to get the QR code here. It's going to return the QR code. Now we're going to if we want to test this, let's go to Postman. So in Postman, first thing first, I don't know if this, Okay, so this is not going to work because the token is already expired, right? So first of all, let's log in properly. So assuming the user is not yet, so coming back here, I'm going to, let's access the database to see what the database looks like. So this is our database. I'm just going to refresh. Now this is our database. We have no user in the database. So the first thing we would want to do in Postman is to create a user. So instead of login, we're going to do a sign up. So for sign up, we're going to do username, email, and password. And then when we send this, yeah, so when we sign up a user, immediately the user is signed up and we get our access token, and we store the refresh token to the cookie, right? But now if we now want to so that means we have an access token which we can auto add here so that it passes alongside all our requests. So we can now go to the 2FA/setup route, and then once we go here and click on send, it's going to generate this QR code. Right now, if you copy, you're going to copy right from here. So it's a base 64 code. So now there is, so I'm going to copy that. Now there is a website I know, so you can just go online and search for base 64 to image converter. Base 64 to image. I know the code built to website here. Now when you paste that code here, it's going to generate a QR code for you, right? Now there is this Chrome extension called Authenticator. So if you install it to your Chrome browser, it would help you be able to scan QR codes while you test like this. So when you click on it, you would be able to scan you're able to scan any QR code. So when you scan it, it's telling us it has been added. Now you see the email address. This is the email, this is the name of the application, and then we have our code. So now we have been able to go through the first process of being able to set up the authenticator. Now the next thing is for us to verify the setup. Now we're going to create a new route for verify the setup. So first, let's go to the auth route. We're going to comment this out. Now it's going to be a verify setup route, and it's also still going to be a protected route. So we're going to create confirm 2FA setup. So let me import it here. And now going to the controller, so I'm going to paste this function here. And now what this function is doing is that just like as usual, we're taking the request and the response, and then since it is a protected route, so we're able to extract the user ID, and then also the user is going to pass the token as the body of the request. Right now, in that situation where you don't want to store a temporary secret, so you're going to be passing the token and the secret, and then here you would have been returning the QR code and the secret, right? So now you're passing just the token and passing just the token. We're going to get the secret, the temporary secret, from the database, right? And that all of that is going to be happening in the service here. So in the service, we're going to create a function verify 2FA setup in the 2FA service file, and there we're going to be passing the user ID and token. So let's go to the service file, right? And here we're going to be passing the user ID and the token, so they are both strings. And then the next thing that is happening is we are getting the user from Prisma using the ID which we have gotten. And then here the next thing is so since we have gotten the user, we're able to extract the temporary secret, right? And then the next thing is we are verifying it. So this is another thing that the authenticator function from OTP library helps you do. It helps you verify this token using the secret. So this is why we need the secret, right? So when you pass the token and the secret through the verify method, it then verifies it. So if you pass the wrong token, so it's not going to match the secret, right? And then if this is valid, if it is not valid, it's going to throw an error. Now if it is valid, we're going to update our database. First of all, we're going to set this to true. So remember here we said it is this, so coming back here is going to be 2FA enabled, and I think this also is 2FA secret, right? So here is going to be 2FA secret. So what's happening is we are setting this to true now. So this shows that 2FA is already enabled for this account, and we are storing the secret and we're setting this to null. So like I said, this is not something you may want to do in your own approach, but this is definitely what you're going to do. But for this, you may not want to do it this way, right? And then we are returning true. Now I'm going to save this file, and then in the controller, what's going to happen is, so if we get true, like if this works out, the next thing 2FA setup is complete and our database is going to know, right? So now that we have this route, so we can now go to the verify setup route. So I'm just going to copy this and go to Postman. So I'm going to go to the verify setup route and go to the body. I think I have to draw this down. Go to the body and we have to pass the token. Now looking at the browser, the token would have changed repeatedly. So the new token is 518036. So 518036. 518036. Now when we click on send, yeah, it tells us the 2FA setup is complete. Now when we go to the database and we refresh, we're going to see the new user, and it tells us two-factor 2FA is enabled. We see the secret and we see null here. So this way we have been able to set up two-factor authentication successfully in our Node.js project. Now the next aspect of this two-factor authentication is, it's not just all about setting it up, it's all about it's taking effect when a user logs in. So the whole idea is when a user logs in, they don't just log in with their email and password. After they've entered their email and password, we also want them to enter their token. Now when they enter their token, we're going to compare it against the secrets we have in our database, and then we're going to be able to know that this is a verified user. So it's a multi-factor authentication, right? So now this means that we have to adjust our login code, right? So if you come to the existing authentication code that we had before, if you look at the login controller here, so we're getting the email and the password, and then we are now like passing the email and password to the auth service login here. And here what we are doing is we're getting the password, so we are getting the user from the Prisma database, right? And then when we get it, we generate and the service. So we're going to check if this user has two-factor enabled, then we don't want the process to work this way, right? And this is like where the whole this is the whole logic. So first of all, in the service file, so we are going to add an if statement just before the token is created. So after we have been able to verify this user, that this user exists in our database, and we have confirmed the password, that the password is real, then the next thing is we're going to create an if statement, right? So sorry, this same thing here. Yeah, so what we are doing is, it's a boolean, right? So we're checking if this is true. if this is true, what we want to do is we are going to generate a temporary token. So remember, we are not yet generating the access token, right? And we don't just want anybody to access this. So what happens is, after the user has gone to the login route, then we want them to go to the 2FA/login route for them to enter their token, right? But we want this route to still be protected so that not anybody can access this route. So we're going to adjust our middleware code so that like we are creating a temporary token, and so this temporary token is going to be passed here, and then for us to be able to like confirm, right? So that's what we're trying to do in this service code. So we are generating a temporary token, and for us to do this quickly in our environment folder, so I'm just going to create another. So you can actually just use one secret. You can just call it JW2 secret and use it all through, but I'm just trying to follow like standard approach, right? So I've created the secret. Now coming to the token, I'm going to create two new functions to generate temporary token, and then to also verify it. So I'm just going to paste the code here. So two codes. So I'm just going to call it generate temporary 2FA token and verify temporary 2FA token. So what's happening is, and this is just gonna last for 5 minutes, right? So I'm gonna copy this, go back to the service, generate temporary 2FA token, and it's gonna get this from here. Right, so what's happening here is, if 2FA is enabled, we're going to generate a token, and then we're going to return that token, and then we're just saying that, oh, this user requires 2FA. This user requires 2FA. Now in the controller file, we're also going to attach another if statement, just a very simple and basic one, right? So now here we are no longer going to be expecting access token and refresh token, because in the service here we are returning require FA, and so in case this happens, right, the user doesn't get here where they get to like see this and this, right? So we can adjust this to say results. Yep, I think this works. So we can adjust this to say results, right? Now before cookies or anything is generated, because we're not sure like we're going to get refresh token and access token, so we're still going to have another if statement here and say, if this result as requires a 2FA. So in a situation where this happens, right, so there will be requires a 2FA set to true, right? So if this is set to true, then what we are trying to say, we're still saying that require FA, we are returning the require, and then we are returning the token, right? We're returning the token. Else, if all of that does not happen, so we want to set the refresh token to the cookie. So result the refresh token, and then the access token is going to be result.access token. I think I'm the one that's strange. All right. Yeah, so the access token is going to be result.access token. Now I've been able to adjust the existing login code so that it checks the database to ensure if a user has two-factor authentication enabled. So we're saying that the login process is going to be completely different, right? And now let's adjust the middleware, right? So currently we just have the require auth here. So we also want to create like a function for require temp token. You can use the same function, right? But so this code is easier for everybody to understand, so I'm just going to create another function called require temporary token, and it's very similar to the one above. So the only thing is that is this function here, right? So here we are verifying the access token, but here we are going to be verifying the temporary two-factor token, right? So that's what we have here, and then we're just going to import it from here. So with that, we have this, and then in our route folder, right? So we're going to require temporary token. Yeah, so the middleware is all set. So the next thing is for us to complete the 2FA login, right? So we're going, so this is a 2FA login route. So we're going to go back to our controller, the 2FA controller, right? We're going to go back to the 2FA controller, and then we're going to add the function there. Now what this does is, now when the user is trying to, so the only thing we're expecting from the user is a token, right? But because we signed a secret, we signed a token here, so generate temporary token. So we signed it using the user ID, so we still have access to the user ID, and this is one reason why I'm doing all of this. So we have access to the user ID, then we get the token that the user enters, and then we pass it to the service which we're going to create now. So go to the 2FA service file, and then I'm going to add this code here. Now what this is doing is we're getting the user ID and the token, right? And then we're verifying the user in the database, so we're using the user ID, and then we're checking if there is a secret. So if we have the 2FA secret, so it's 2FA secret. So if we have the 2FA secret, so we're checking if we have the 2FA secret in the database. So if it does not exist, that means 2FA is not enabled, right? Now, if it is enabled, so we are going to take the token that the user passed and the secret and check if it is valid. So we're going to verify it. So if we verify it and it is valid, now we're going to generate access token and refresh token. I don't know why this throws an error. Can't find generate access token and refresh token, or we've not imported it into this file. So we're going to generate access token and refresh token, and so it's going to generate it and it's going to return the access token and refresh token. Now in the controller, in the 2FA controller, so we're going to get the access token and the refresh token, and then we're going to store the refresh token in cookies, and we're going to return the access token so that the user can add it for subsequent requests. So this way we have been able to amend the login flow for a user who has two-factor authentication turned on, right? For a user who has two-factor authentication. Now before we go ahead to test this, I'm just going to implement the last route, which is the disable 2FA controller. So in this, understanding that the user toggles it, so the user can decide to remove the old 2FA setup from their account, right? Now we need to ensure that they can do this. So for this route, it's not yet enabled because we've not yet imported it, right? Yeah. So we need the user to be able, now for the user to be able to do this, so it's the normal regular authentication, right? So the user has to be logged in properly for them to be able to disable 2FA authentication. Now what this disabling is going to do is it's just going to change the value of the database to ensure that 2FA is false, and then we are removing the secret from the database. That's all. So since the user always confirms against the secret, and since we always check if like the user 2FA is enabled, so all of that just does not work any longer, right? So first thing is in our controller, Yeah, so in the controller, we're going to add this code. So it's going to get the user ID from the session, and then we are going to disable. So we're going to pass the user ID, and all of that is going to happen in the service file. So just a very short code to be able to delete to update the database. So we're updating the database. So we're checking if we're setting 2FA enabled to false, we're setting 2FA secret to null, right? So that's all we are doing, and then we're returning true. Now if all of this happens, right, now in the controller, it's not going to tell us that 2FA is disabled, right? So 2FA is disabled. So here I'm going to be able to import this here, and with that we have been able to create and implement the whole setup for 2FA authentication in our Node.js project. Now I'm just going to go ahead to test this out. So going back to Postman now, let me go ahead to disable 2FA. Now if I do 2FA / disable invalid or expired token, so I guess my access token has expired, so I need to go ahead to log in. Now for me to log in, yeah, so I'm going to log in. Now when I log in, I'm going to get an access token, invalid email, so it's supposed to be John. Yeah, so oh wow, so since so the login process has changed entirely because this user is has 2FA enabled, right? So we get the temporary token, right? So this temporary token, we need to go to authorization and add it there, right? So for us to be able to verify so we're now going to go to 2FA/login. Now when we go to 2FA/login, we want to pass the token. Now when we come here, the token is 191,798. And then when we send this, it's going to give us an access token, right? And now this access token is what we can now use for all other requests in our application. For example, if we remember, we set up a protected route the other time, right? Which is a GET request. And then tells us that we access it, and like before, we can also disable. So 2FA/disable, we can also disable two-factor. Oh, there's an error. 2FA, let me confirm the route. 2FA/disable, I think we are not meant to pass anything, right? But still I get the error. Yeah, I get an error, and it looks like I must have messed things up in the code somewhere. So let's go to the service file, or no, the controller, and here. So we're getting the user ID from the session, but it is not user.id, it's just user ID, right? Just user ID. So this is going to restart, and I'm just going to go back to Postman and let me close this, right? The response, and just run it again, and it's going to tell us 2FA is disabled. Now I will come to the database and refresh. We're going to see 2FA is false, the secrets are gone, and then you can set it up again. So this is how to set up two-factor authentication in your Node.js API. I tried my best to explain in the way I understand, and I hope it helps you understand the whole 2FA setup around your Node.js project. I understand that I copied and pasted the code, but like, yeah, it just makes it easier. So I really don't know how to type fast, and yeah, with the position of my mic. But like with time, I would like learn how to like type fast in tutorials like this, so that you can follow. But you can with the way I explain the codes, right, you should be able to like pause the video and be able to like copy the code or type the code. But yeah, that is all for this video. I'll see you in another one. Bye.